This is part 2 of the data entry portion of economic development. In this video, we will walk through the process of reporting accomplishments for an economic development activity that meets a low-mod job or LMJ national objective. The best way to learn IDIS is to get hands-on practice. I want to encourage you to log into the UAT version of IDIS and enter the data as you follow the video. You can pause this video at any time using the pause button in the lower left-hand corner. You can switch back and forth between this video and IDIS by holding down the Alt key on your keyboard and then pressing the Tab key. If you're not logged into UAT, pause the video and do so now. You'll know if you're in UAT if you see UAT at the top of the screen. If you are unsure of how to access UAT, there are directions toward the bottom of the IDIS login page and also in Module 1 of this course. This video is part 2 of the Economic Development module. If you want to do the data entry for this tutorial, you need to first complete the activity setup exercise in part 1. I'll be using the data found in Case Study 5 of the course material. You can use the data from the case study or simply make it up as you go along. In the previous video, we set up an activity for a loan to Thompson Automotive. We will now walk through the steps to report accomplishments for this activity and update its status to complete. As always, we start at the home page of IDIS. If you want to follow along in the manual, we are in Chapter 7 for the first few screens. Then we will skip to Chapter 12 for the low-mod job national objective screens. Right now, we are on page 7-1. To report accomplishments for our activity, we need to go to the Project's Activities module in the navigation menu. The system, by default, shows the Search Activities page. This is used to find existing activities in the system. If you know the IDIS activity number, that's the fastest way to find the activity. If you don't know it, you can use any combination of the other search fields or simply click Search to get a list of all of your activities. Once the results come back, you will see your options on the right in the Action column. We should see Edit and View. The View function will let you look at the data, but you won't be able to change anything. We want to be able to input accomplishment data, so we will choose Edit. This is the same page we saw when we added the activity. We have two fields we need to update here, the activity status and the completion date. The system won't let us update these until we provide the accomplishment data, so let's do that first. If we scroll down a bit to the table in the center of the screen, we will see some buttons for CDBG. The system does a nice job of separating out the data needed for setup and that needed for accomplishments. At this point, we want to report accomplishments. If you're following along in your manual, we are now in Chapter 12. If you look at the first page in Chapter 12, you will see the manual tells you which pages to reference based on the national objective and matrix code you are using. In our case, guidance for the first screen starts on page 12-2. The first thing we have to do on this page is specify the program year in which the benefits were realized. This is an important point to keep in mind when reporting accomplishments for CDBG. It doesn't matter what grant year the activity is funded out of. And it doesn't matter what action plan the activity is listed in. If the job was created in 2010, we will use 2010 in this field. At that point, the rest of the data we enter on this page and the next will be counted as 2010 accomplishments. The next field is the accomplishments narrative. HUD does not have specific guidance for this field. The best source of guidance for the narrative is your local CPD representative, as it will be this person who will be reading the narrative as part of your caper. In general, you can use the narrative to tell the activity's story. For example, if the activity is stalled and has not spent any money in the program year, you may want to use the narrative to explain why. For economic development activities, it would be helpful to include the number of jobs created to date, the number that still need to be created, and a completion date. The next field lists the accomplishment type, in this case, jobs, and the proposed number of units for the program year we selected. The system will provide this number once we save this screen. The next section will collect direct benefit data for the beneficiaries of the activity, in this case the people hired for the jobs we created. We are now on page 12-4 of the manual. I'll use the beneficiary data in the case study to populate these fields. 2 of the beneficiaries were white, one of whom was also Hispanic. To add another row to this table, we need to click on Add Another Race. The other 2 beneficiaries were Black African American. Let's use the case study to complete the income table as well. Remember that when classifying the beneficiaries for low-mod job activities, use the household income before they got the job. The final section of this page collects data on the number of jobs created and retained. Just like the table we saw during activity setup, we will report the number of jobs in the full-time column and the number of weekly hours for the part-time columns. For the case study, let's assume that 2 of the jobs are full-time, one of which is taken by a low-moderate income person. The other 2 jobs are part-time at 20 hours per week. We will report 40 in the part-time column and report both part-time jobs as low-moderate income. When you're finished entering the data, you will see the system calculate the low and moderate income percent and the number of full-time equivalent jobs created. Let's click Save and Continue. When we try to save the data, the system will check the race and income totals to see if they match. If they don't, the system will return an error and prompt you to correct the data. If all is good, the system will move us to page 2. If you're following along in your manual, we are in Chapter 12 on page 12-8. This second page collects performance measures. Performance measures provide more detail about who the beneficiaries are and what type of work was done. These will change based on the type of activity you undertake. For our job creation activity, the system is collecting the number of jobs that receive employee-sponsored health care and the number of persons who were unemployed prior to taking the jobs created by this activity. The system also wants you to categorize the types of jobs created. For definitions of each category, please refer to Appendix G of your manual. For the case study, I will report 1 manager, 1 office/clerical, and 2 technicians. The next section collects data on the businesses assisted. Indicate if the business is new or existing. If the business existed at the time of assistance, indicate if the business expanded or relocated as a result of the assistance. In the next 2 fields, indicate if the business rehabilitated their building or facade as part of the assistance, and if the business provides goods or services to the community. The final section collects the DUNS number for the business. This information is required. You should require businesses to include their DUNS number as part of their loan application. Businesses should not need to pay a fee in order to receive a DUNS number. To request a free DUNS number, they can visit this website, fedgov.dnb.com/webform. When finished entering your data, click on the Save button to return to the first page. We are now finished updating the accomplishments for the activity for that program year. However, the business has not yet created all of the jobs, so we cannot yet mark the activity as complete. Since many businesses take more than 1 year to satisfy their job creation requirements, let's walk through adding another program year for reporting accomplishments. Click on the Accomplishments button to go back to the Accomplishments screen. By default, the system will display the most recent year of accomplishments. We don't want to update this year. If we did so, you would not get credit for the additional job, since HUD only reviews and counts the most current year of accomplishment data. Instead, we will use the Add New Accomplishment Year button. By doing so, we get a fresh set of accomplishment screens to report our 2011 accomplishments. Again, it's very important that you report accomplishments in the year in which they were realized. Let's quickly go through and enter the data for the final job based on the information found in the case study. Now I want to show you one more feature on the previous page. Now that you have multiple report years for the activity, you can view specific years using this selector, or you can view total years to see a summary of everything. Now that the business has satisfied the job creation requirements, we can return to the first page and update the activity status to complete. By completing an activity in IDIS, you are stating that no additional funds will be drawn and there are no additional accomplishments to be reported. Before we change the status to complete, the system wants us to check that all the required fields have been completed. To do this, we will click on the Check CDBG button. You may have to scroll to the right to see it. The system will refresh the page and give you a message at the top. If there are no errors, the system will display CDBG activity pathway is complete. Otherwise, the system will list any problems that need to be corrected before completing the activity. The final step is to change the activity status field to complete. Put in a completion date and click the Save button. Since we're in training, we're going to see a few errors, including the draw is still being processed and the completion date is the same as the funding date. These are issues that occur during training because we are doing everything on the same day. Chances are you won't see these errors when entering your data throughout the program year.